When the chief stood in front of the microphones and said the words, "The suspect is deceased," I felt the kind of hollow relief you only get when you've been clenching your jaw for months. I sat in my parked car outside my apartment, snow hissing against the windshield, breath fogging the inside glass. The radio crackled with applause from somewhere I couldn't see. It should have been over. The man who put my brother on a gurney and my mother into silence had exchanged gunfire with officers on the edge of town near the abandoned cannery. Case closed, the anchor said, voice smooth as a curtain being drawn. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. You're going to want to hear this one through the end. I turned the key, then changed my mind and turned it back. There's a quiet right after bad news ends, a vacuum that makes you think peace has weight. I studied my hands on the steering wheel. They were still. No tremor, no triumph. Just emptiness in a human shape. A part of me whispered that I should drive to the cannery, stare at the tape fluttering in the wind, make sure the ghosts were finally pinned down. I didn't. I went upstairs, reheated last night's coffee, and stood at the window, the way my brother used to when he was working late, counting headlights like rosary beads. The next morning, the city pretended it remembered how to breathe. Plows carved gray channels through the snow. The deli on 3rd steamed up its windows with onion soup and gossip. I put on the wool coat I'd been meaning to replace and walked out into air that smelled like a clean blade. I had errands I'd put off while the investigation tied knots in my days. Batteries for the smoke detector, a new notebook, because the old one was chewed thin with worry, and milk that wouldn't turn to sour chalk when you looked away. I took 7th toward the river, boots squeaking, hands buried deep. That's when I saw him. He stepped off the number 12 bus and cut across the corner by Phelan's Hardware, like he knew exactly which tile was cracked. He wore a charcoal peacoat with a collar up and a knit cap that didn't belong to this neighborhood. He moved clean, no limp, no bandage, shoulders loose, gaze unbothered. He reached for the door with a gloved hand, the way you reach for a door you've opened 100 times. The bell above it sang its little quarter-second ding. He disappeared inside. It would have been nothing if nothing wasn't sometimes a future dress as a shrug. I stood there with 2 shopping lists in my pocket and last winter's grief pack behind my ribs. I told myself 3 things in quick succession. The suspect is dead. I am not a cop. I am not crazy. Then the 4th thing arrived on a delay, like a late train. But I know his walk. I'd watched it a dozen times on my brother's phone, frame by frame. The footage from the liquor store security camera. The same middle-distance focus, like the world belonged to him, like he could press pause on any room he entered and rearrange the furniture. I crossed the street. Inside Phelan's, it smelled like warm rope and boiled coffee. A space heater snapped in the corner. Somebody had left it too close to a display of snow shovels, and the plastic was going soft at the edge. The aisles were narrow enough to force politeness. I tucked myself in behind a shelf of brass hinges and watched him browse the fasteners like he was picking out jewelry. He touched labels, read wattages, held a pack of drywall anchors up to the light. I had memorized his face from newspaper grain, and an artist composite from Vigil, a jaw that pinched when he smiled, the left eyebrow that climbed a half-step higher than the right. The hat hid the hairline, but the mouth was the same when he frowned at a price tag. Unconvinced by numbers, he looked up. Our eyes didn't meet. They glided by each other like ships taught to pretend they hadn't seen land. I could hear my pulse in my ears over music, something from the 90s that used to play in my brother's car, while he drummed the steering wheel and swore at traffic like a poet. Help you find something? Mr. Phelan appeared at my elbow, all cardigan and nicotine-stained mustache. His breath was coffee and peppermint. I glanced at him and lied automatically. Batteries. And cap near the register. He smiled with the kind of small-town kindness that assumes evil belongs to cities. By the time I turned back, the man in the peacoat had decided on a bag of screws and a box cutter. He walked to the counter with a gait that made the bells sing again in a way I could not unhear. I fished blindly for a pack of AA batteries with my left hand and for courage with my right. He paid in cash. No tremble when he counted. No glance over the shoulder. He tucked the receipt into his coat pocket like a man who expected to return things. Then he was moving toward the door and the life where he belonged. And I was moving too, because some mistakes don't get to keep happening. Outside, the air took a bite. He turned right, not left, toward the side street with a mural of salmon racing upstream. The bus had already gone. He walked like a person with a place to be, no pause for bearings. I followed at a distance that felt both cowardly and sane. The snow underfoot had been churned into a gray slush that sucked at heels. He never looked back. He passed a bakery, ignored the glazed knots in the window, crossed against a blinking orange hand with the kind of entitlement you can smell. I rehearsed explanations. "Sir, excuse me, this is going to sound strange. I heard my mother's voice, the one she used when you were about to borrow trouble. Let the dead be dead, and let the living go to work." But the chief's promise still rang in my head like a bad hymn. Deceased. As if truth were paperwork. He stopped at the corner store. The bell there also sang. This town never ran out of bells. He slipped inside. I drifted to the opposite curb and planted myself behind a parked Subaru, watched through my breath-clouded reflection. He bought something that fit in his palm. Gum? A lighter? He nodded at the clerk. Nod returned. Recognition flickered between them like a small, polite flame. I felt my phone in my coat pocket. It was heavier than it should have been. There were 2 numbers in there I had promised myself I wouldn't call again. One because I didn't want to be a bother, one because I didn't want to be a son who begged. But promises are built for ordinary days, and this wasn't one. He came out with his purchase and headed north toward the river. I stayed put. The wind knifed through the coat, found the places time had thinned. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera, snapped 3 quick photos. Profile, gait, the old scar on his cheekbone that the composite artist had missed, the one you only notice when the light catches straight on. My hands were steady. It surprised me. He turned the corner and vanished down the hill. When I couldn't hear his steps anymore, I scrolled a name I had been avoiding, the one that had sat under my thumb for weeks like a live wire. I pressed it. The phone rang twice. "Detective Ames," said the voice I remember from last summer. Dry, precise, the sound of a person who tries not to make promises they can't keep. "It's me," I said. "You told me I should call if I ever remembered anything else." There was a pause, the pencil scratching on the other end. "Yes." I didn't remember. I said, "I saw." Before we continue, hit subscribe and tell me where you're listening. You'll want a front row seat for this. The man vanished down the hill. The river took his silence the way it takes all the city's secrets. Calm on top, fast underneath. I stood by the mural with my phone cooling in my palm and made the second call I'd promised myself I wouldn't. "Rory," I said when he picked up. The bell over his corner store rang on the line, like a tell in a bad poker hand. "It's me." "You okay?" he asked. We'd grown up 3 bus stops apart and 2 lifetimes distant. He sounded like he was already halfway into worry. "Your front camera," I said. "Please don't touch it. A guy just came in. Knit cap, charcoal pea coat. Bought something small. I need the footage." "Yeah, we keep it for 30 days. "Don't review it," I said. "Not yet." I heard my voice and didn't recognize the authority in it. "A detective is on her way. Do I need a lawyer?" He only half joked. "Not unless the dead shop at your counter," I said, and ended the call. Detective Ames arrived 8 minutes later in a city sedan that needed a wash and the kind of flat boots you wear when you plan to stand longer than your patience. She was smaller than I remembered, or maybe my fear had been larger. She clicked a pen as if it kept time. "Show me," she said. I handed her the photos. She didn't flinch at the improvised angles or the way my breath ghosted the edges. She studied each one like it was a map. Her finger hovered over the scar on his cheekbone. "You saw him go inside, Feelings?" "And the corner store. Cash both times. Box cutter at Feelings. Something palm size at Rory's." "Did he clock you?" she asked. "Not then." She nodded the way people do when they're aligning the pieces in their heads. A board, a pattern, a place to set their next move. "Walk," she said. We retraced it. The bell at Phelan sang, and Mr. Phelan materialized from behind a wind chime display. "Detective," he said, surprised and formality by the badge. "We don't usually need police for screws." "Box cutter," Ames said. Sold within the last hour to a man wearing a charcoal coat. Mr. Phelan scratched at his mustache. Sells every hour in winter. People opening packages. You know, receipt logs? Ames asked. He showed us the drawer, where time gets flattened to numerals. She worked backward until she found a cash sale for a box cutter, 11:14 a.m., 2 streets after bus, 5 before the river. She flipped the receipt over, frowned at the blank where a name would have been if this were a kinder world. Cameras. Ames asked. Mr. Phelan's face, the thing I've seen on 100 people who don't like being measured. We've got one, but it's an old dog. Doesn't always sit when you tell it. We looked up. A dome camera gazed down at us with a cataract of neglect. The indicator light was off. It had probably been off for a year. Ames didn't sigh. She's the kind of professional who swallows sighs and converts them to paperwork later. Thank you, she said, and we moved on. At Rory's, the bell worked too well. It dinged us in the door 3 times when it only should have twice. Rory stood behind the counter with a face that said he'd already replayed every mistake he'd made since 8th grade. You called ahead, Ames said to me, then to him. Footage, please. He led us to the back office where a monitor showed 4 gray squares. The top left was the alley, empty except for a trash bin and the echo of graffiti. Top right was a counter. Frozen on a frame of him picking his teeth with a paperclip because the timestamp read 3:12 a.m. last Wednesday. Bottom right was a front door, a clean view of the bell, the glass, the world walking in and out. Bottom left was black. System rebooted during a brownout last month. Rory said, apologetic to the point of prayer. My cousin promised to fix it. Play the front, Ames said. He scrubbed backward to 11:19 a.m. There I was across the street, a blur with a heartbeat. There was a door, swinging, the bell doing its tinny job. But when the man in the pea coat had been framed in perfect clarity, the feed hiccuped 1 frame, 2, a leap. He was at the counter already, profile to the camera, cap shadowing the scar. Pause, Ames said. We stared at the pixelated man. Even low-res. The smile didn't climb to the eyes. He passed the bill. Rory's hand took it. The register lip read 2.99. The man palmed a small rectangle. Lighter, Rory guessed. Or a scratch card. I can pull the UPC report. Do, Ames said. Then you know him? Rory hesitated. He's been in before. Not often. Twice? 3 times? Cash. Quiet. He doesn't chat. You ever hear a name? I asked. Rory shook his head, then stopped halfway. Someone called him Gil once. Or Gil. Hard G, like the fish thing. Ames blinked. It was the only concession to surprise I got from her all day. She took down the time stamp, the price. The maybe name, the way you collect stones when building a wall against a river. I thought he was dead. Rory said into the humming of the cooler. Didn't you guys? He caught himself. Sorry. Ames capped her pen. We made a public statement based on the information we had. What information? I asked. She looked at me, weighing the cost of the next sentence. A body at the cannery, she said. Male, approximate height and build. Wallet recovered at the scene with identification belonging to our suspect. Fire damage from a small post-incident blaze. Likely squatters trying to stay warm. Dental prelim didn't contradict, but the dental records were incomplete. Next of kin unattainable. We had a witness who saw someone running. We had blood. We followed the story the facts told. What about fingerprints? I asked, remembering every cop show I'd ever watched get through an empty night. Partial, she said. Soot and heat smeared truth in very specific ways. Outside, a siren wound itself past a window and unwound somewhere else. The city was doing what cities do, moving problems to new corners. Ames took Rory's statement, thanked him, and told him to call if Gil returned. We stepped back into the bite of noon. The wind had teeth now. You believe me? I asked. I believe you saw a man who matches a description better than most descriptions deserve, she said. I believe the scar. I believe the way your hands aren't shaking. She glanced at my photos again. And I believe, professionally, that I need to unbelieve a few things before the chief notices the shape of this hole. We stood by the mural, like we were waiting for a bus that had decided to retire. Across the street, a black SUV idled at the curb with the kind of tinted windows that made a point. The driver wasn't looking at us. He was looking at his phone in a universal posture of the bored and dangerous. After a moment, the SUV slid away without signaling. Ames watched it go without turning her head. The cannery had been dead longer than the suspect was supposed to be. Red brick, black windows, a skyline tooth chipped by decades of wind and neglect. The river whispered behind it like someone in another room trying not to be overheard. Ames parked on the gravel shoulder, left the engine running against the cold. "This is it," she said, not as an introduction, but as a diagnosis. The front chain-link fence had a gap just wide enough for a man to walk through without ducking, wide enough for someone who knew they'd be back. The police tape was still there in theory, sun-faded yellow ribbons snagged in the wire like old party streamers. We stepped over half-buried beer cans and a broken extension cord. The snow here was thin, the ground packed down by boots that didn't care about permission. "You did the announcement from here?" I asked. She shook her head. "From HQ? Media hates field work in the cold." The main doors were warped inward. Hinges rusted to the color of old blood. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of wet cardboard and something faintly sweet that made the hairs on my arms stand up. Our footsteps echoed in the kind of way that tells you the walls remember more than they'll share. She pointed to a dark patch on the concrete, near the loading dock. Fire started there. Squatters, probably. The body was found in that corner. She indicated a blackened alcove where the brick had peeled like paint. I moved closer. The soot made everything look frozen mid-breath. There was still a ring on the floor where something metal had once sat. A barrel, maybe. The heat had climbed the wall, leaving a faint silhouette of something that might have been a man, if you believed in those kinds of stains. They were sure it was him because of a wallet. I asked, "Wallet, height, build, some personal effects." "Knife with a distinctive handle. Same make as the one from your brother's case." Her voice was flat, but it carried the weight of an admission. Couldn't someone plan all that? I asked. "Sure," she said, "but most people don't burn bodies for sport." She crouched by the blackened wall, ran a glove finger along the soot, examined it like a doctor checking a wound that never healed right. "The fire didn't run hot enough to destroy bone," she murmured. "If he was here, there should have been more remains." But there weren't. Not enough to match to anything conclusive. But the chief was under pressure. Community wanted closure. So closure is what we gave them. "And you?" "I file reports," she said. A metal clatter echoed from somewhere deeper in the building. Not loud, but deliberate. Metal hitting metal in the rhythm of work, not accident. Ames's head turned sharply toward the sound. "You armed?" she asked me. "Do I look like I'm armed?" I whispered. "Good," she said. "Means you won't do anything stupid." We followed the sound through a corridor lined with rusted conveyors. The floor was wet, puddles black as oil. The smell of the river got stronger the further in we went. My boots slid on a patch of algae growing in a place no sunlight had touched in years. The noise stopped. We reached a side room with a sagging wooden door. Ames pushed it open with the end of her pen. Inside, a cot, 2 milk crates stacked as a table, an empty thermos, and a pack of playing cards arranged in a half-built house. The air was warmer here, faintly tinged with cigarette smoke. "Someone's living here," I said, "or using it between lives." Ames replied. On the makeshift table, there was a receipt. She picked it up with a pen. Yesterday's date, Rory's Corner Store. $2.99. The lighter. "Son of a..." she started, then cut herself off. Footsteps above us. We both froze, heads tilting in sync toward the ceiling. The boards creaked once, twice, then silence. Ames moved first, slipping out into the hall, eyes scanning for the stairs. I followed because not following her felt like staying in a burning room. The staircase was narrow, metal steps worn smooth by decades of laborers who probably never thought their workplace would turn into a crime scene. Ames climbed fast but quiet. I kept my eyes on the gaps between the steps, half expecting to see a shadow pass across them from above. We reached the top. The space was cavernous, windows broken, light cutting in at harsh angles. Snow drifted in little piles against the walls, empty except for a single set of footprints leading from the stairs to a hole in the far wall where bricks had been kicked out. Ames walked the gap and looked down. A rusted fire escape clung to the side of the building, leading to the alley below. The footprints were fresh, edges crisp, snow not yet crusted. Whoever had been here minutes ago. She didn't bother swearing this time. She just pulled her radio from her belt and spoke into it low and fast. A description, a direction, the word suspect followed by possibly armed. From somewhere on the street side, a car engine roared to life. Tires squealed. Ames darted back to the gap. But the alley was empty except for exhaust hanging in the cold air, like a ghost trying to decide if it should stay. You think it was him? I asked. Think. She shook her head. No. I know. I followed her gaze to the footprints again. One of them, pressed deep in the rest, showed the faint, curved tread of a boot sole, a mark I had seen once before, in a photo from the liquor store's floor after my brother's body had been taken away. He's been here the whole time, I said. Not the whole time, Ames corrected. Just long enough to watch us believe he was gone. She took out her phone, snapped photos of the prints, the fire escape, the alley. I stood there in the cold upper room, the smell of smoke and metal in my nose, and thought about the photo text I'd gotten earlier, me and Ames under the mural. If he knew we were there, I started. He's watching, she finished, and now he knows we're watching back. Her radio crackled with a voice, saying they'd lost visual on the vehicle. No plates caught, just dark SUV, possible tint. The same SUV we'd seen near Phelan's. Ames pocketed the radio, glanced at me. You wanted proof? Congratulations. You're in it now. The words landed heavier than the snow outside. And somewhere far off, not in this building, not in this part of the city, a bell rang again. We left the cannery through the alley the SUV had ghosted out of. Ames scanned the street with the casual alertness of someone who's been on both ends of a stakeout. The snow crunched underfoot, like it was taking notes. Stay off your phone unless you have to, she said. If he's watching, he could be in your messages before they hit the cloud. Can he do that? Anyone can if they have the right friend. We reached her sedan. She popped the trunk, pulled out a plastic evidence bag, and handed it to me. Inside was a cheap prepaid flip phone. You're giving me a burner? I'm giving you a landline you can carry, she said. Don't text from it. Voice only. If I call, answer. If you call me, make sure no one's close enough to hear. I turned the phone over in my hand, the weight lighter than the responsibility. Feels like we skipped a few steps, I said. You saw him, she replied. That skipped steps. We drove in silence. At a red light, Ames's own phone buzzed. She glanced, frowned, and showed me the screen. Unknown number. One photo. It was from inside the cannery, today, within the last half hour. The shot was taken from above, probably the mezzanine we'd just been on. It showed me and Ames in the corner of the alcove where the body had been found. In the frame, my head is turned toward her, her pen pointing at the scorched wall. Below the photo, I liked the first funeral better. My stomach folded in on itself. He was in there while we were... Not was... She cut in, is... He's not done. She saved the photo, dropped the phone into the cup holder, and pressed harder on the accelerator. The rest of the ride to the precinct felt like a road with no intersections. Her desk was a crowded map of unfinished stories. Files with their corners curling, coffee rings soaking into cover sheets, a wall calendar that still said October. She unlocked the bottom drawer, pulled out a manila folder marked Gil, probable AKA, and spread its contents like a hand of bad cards. Mug shots, each one slightly different but carrying the same bones, the slope of the jaw, the one eyebrow arch higher, the faint scar. Arrests in 3 states, all under different names. Charges ranging from assault to credit card fraud. Always out on bail, always missing his next court date. This is the guy you told the city was dead. I asked. This is the guy they told me was dead. She corrected. The Cannery Corpse fit enough of these details to keep the chief happy. The ID in the wallet matched the name from the mugshots. End of story. Until I saw him, I said. Until you saw him, she echoed. She pulled one photo from the folder and tapped it. That's from 4 years ago. Portland, busted for moving stolen electronics through a hardware storefront. I stared at the grainy print. He was wearing a charcoal pea coat even then. A knock at her office door interrupted. A uniformed officer stepped in, dropped an evidence envelope on her desk. This just came to the front desk for you. No return address. No postmark. Hand-delivered. Ames put on gloves, tore it open. Inside was a single Polaroid. My building's front door. Taken sometime in the last day. Snow disturbing the exact pattern my boots had made this morning. On the back, in block letters, keep chasing and see what dies next. I felt my ribs tighten. He knows where I live. Ames slid the photo back into the envelope. Then you're not going back there tonight. I can't just... You can, she said, if you want to stay breathing long enough to tell me everything you know about him. We relocated to a diner 3 blocks from the station, the kind of place where the coffee is older than the cook and the booth vinyl sticks to your coat. Ames took the seat facing the door. I took the one facing her notebook. Start from your brother, she said. So I told her about the liquor store camera, about the footage that never made it to the news, about the way the suspect's walk had carved itself into my memory like a groove in a record. I told her how the case had gone cold until the Cannery death wrapped it up. I told her about the months of trying to stop thinking about it, and the way seeing him step off that bus yesterday had ripped the stitches out of everything. She didn't interrupt except to clarify dates. When I was done, she flipped her notebook shut. He's playing with you, she said. I'm the only one who can ID him, I replied. That's part of it, she said. The rest is control. He likes knowing you're looking over your shoulder. The waitress topped off our coffees without asking. Outside, the sky had gone the flat gray of late afternoon snow. Ames's phone buzzed again. She looked at it, then slid it across the table. Another photo, same unknown number. This one was inside of the diner. Our booth, taken from somewhere near the counter, maybe 10 feet away. In the shot, I'm leaning forward, Ames's pen poised above her notebook. No text this time, just the image. My eyes flicked to the counter. 3 people. An old man nursing soup, a woman in a postal jacket, and a guy in a baseball cap with his face lowered over a plate of fries. None of them were holding a phone, but I knew better. You don't need to hold it up to shoot if you already know the angle. Ames followed my gaze. Eat fast, she said. We've got company. I swallowed 2 mouthfuls of coffee that burned all the way down. Ames dropped enough cash to cover the check and tip, without waiting for change. We walked out into the cold, the bell over the diner door jangling behind us. Across the street, the dark SUV pulled away from the curb. No plates visible. Tinted windows. Same one. He's not hiding anymore, I said. He never was, Ames replied. He's circling. And now... She unlocked the sedan, eyes still on the SUV's disappearing taillights. Now we tighten our own circle. But first, somewhere you can sleep tonight that isn't on his route. I slid into the passenger seat, the burner phone heavy in my pocket. My apartment door burned into my mind from the Polaroid. I thought about the caption. See what dies next. Whoever he met, I wasn't ready to find out. But I had a sinking feeling we'd know soon. Ames didn't take me to a safe house. She took me to a storage unit. It was on the edge of an industrial park, the kind of place you could scream in and get only a forklift to answer. Row after row of metal roll-up doors, each with its own padlock like a line of tin soldiers. She punched in a code, and one of the doors shuttered up to reveal not dusty furniture, but a folding table, 2 battered office chairs, and a corkboard leaning against the wall. This is where we work, she said. No address, no mail, no public records. Nobody knows it's here but me, 2 other people I trust, and now you. It smelled faintly of paper and machine oil. There was a thermos of coffee already on the table, and beside it, a stack of manila folders. One had my name on the tab. You made a file on me? I asked. Anyone who steps into an investigation like this gets a folder, she said. Keeps the details in one place. Details like what? She flipped it open. Printouts of my brother's case notes, stills from the liquor store footage, the photos I'd taken of Gil yesterday, and the Polaroid from the last 24 hours. She'd even printed the text messages, numbers highlighted, timestamps circled in red. He's making contact with you for a reason, Ames said. And if we can figure out why, we can get ahead of him. Why not just arrest him? She gave me the kind of look you give someone who just suggested pushing a stall car uphill with their hands. For what? Walking into a store? Taking photos? We don't have the liquor store footage anymore, and we can't even prove the cannery was staged without more evidence. We need something that sticks. Then what's the plan? Bait, she said simply. She pulled a city map from under corkboard, unfolded across the table. Red pins marked the cannery, Phelan's, Rory's, my apartment, and the diner. A thin blue line connected them in a rough loop. He's moving in a pattern, Ames said. Not random. He's making sure you see him in public, then getting close enough to remind you he's watching. So, how do we catch him in the middle of that? By giving him a middle worth walking into. She pointed to a spot 2 blocks from the river. Old Mason's Market. Closed 3 years ago, but the owner still uses the space for storage. He's a friend of mine. Already agreed to let us wire it up. We'll stage a meeting there tomorrow afternoon. You'll be visible and I'll be invisible. Visible how? The morning of the sting. The motel coffee tasted like boiled cardboard, but I drank it anyway. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lighter from last night turning over my palm, wondering if I should show it to Ames before or after the setup. I finally put it back in the box. It felt safer there, like putting a tooth back under a pillow. At 1:45, Ames picked me up in an unmarked SUV that still smelled faintly of last week's fast food. She didn't say much, just handed me a plain black beanie and a scarf. Less recognizable, she said. If he's already watching, make him second guess before he's sure it's you. We parked 2 blocks from Mason's Market. It was an old brick storefront with dusty front windows and a faded sign. Through the glass, I could see 2 mismatched tables, one directly in the window, and the other toward the back near a shelf of canned goods that had probably expired during the last mayor's term. Inside, the air was warmer than I expected. The owner, a man with shoulders like coat racks, nodded at me but didn't speak. Ames had clearly briefed him. She pointed to the table in the front window. 15 minutes, she said quietly. Sit, sip, stay put. And you? I asked, already in position. She disappeared through a side door that led into the storage area. I could almost feel her watching even before I saw the faint glint of a camera lens tucked into a box of old cereal on the shelf across from me. At exactly 2:15, I sat down, ordered a coffee from the owner, and pulled out the burner phone. I scrolled through its empty call log to make it look like I had somewhere else to be. Outside, the street was quiet. One woman pushing a stroller, 2 teenagers cutting across toward the river, a delivery truck double-parked. 2:18, the coffee arrived. Steam curled into the air in lazy shapes. I kept my eyes on the glass reflection instead of the street. 2:22, the delivery truck pulled away, revealing the dark SUV parked half a block down. No movement inside. Tinted windows. My pulse started keeping time with the wall clock. 2:24, the door opened. A man stepped in, wool cap, black parka. He was broad enough that for a moment I thought it wasn't him. Then he turned his head slightly, and the scar caught the light. Gil. He didn't come straight to me. He wandered toward the shelf of canned goods, picked one up, turned it in his hands like it was something precious. The owner said nothing, just polished the counter. I didn't move, didn't blink. He set the can down, picked up another, then finally looked at me. No smile, just that same middle-distance focus I'd seen in the liquor store footage. The burner buzzed once in my hand. I answered without looking away from him. Stay put, Ames's voice said in my ear. 2 more minutes. Gil walked toward the counter, still watching me from the corner of his eye. He bought a pack of gum. Cash, as always. The owner handed him the change, and he pocketed it slowly, like time was something he could stretch. Then he turned, not toward the door, but toward my table. The burner buzzed again. If he talks to you, keep him talking, Ames said. We're rolling. He stopped at the edge of the table. Up close, the scar was even more obvious, running just under his cheekbone like a fingerprint in skin. You're in my seat, he said. The voice was calm, flat, like he was pointing out the weather. I didn't see your name on it, I said. He glanced at the empty chair across from me. Mind if I sit? I hesitated just long enough to make it look like a decision, then nodded. He lowered himself into the chair, folded his hands on the table. No coat removal, no shifting to get comfortable, just stillness. I've been watching you, he said. I noticed. I wanted to see if you'd keep chasing. And if I did... One corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. Then we'd have this conversation. I glanced toward the counter. The owner was gone, probably in the back with Ames. What do you want? I asked. He leaned in slightly. To make sure you understand that your brother's death wasn't personal. My jaw tightened. That's supposed to make it better? It's supposed to make it clear, he said. You were never the target, until you made yourself one. 222. The delivery truck pulled away, revealing the dark SUV parked half a block down. No movement inside. Tinted windows. My pulse started keeping time with the wall clock. 2:24. The door opened. A man stepped in, wool cap, black parka. He was broad enough that for a moment I thought it wasn't him. Then he turned his head slightly, and the scar caught the light. Gil. He didn't come straight to me. He wandered toward the shelf of canned goods, picked one up, turned it in his hands like it was something precious. The owner said nothing, just polished the counter. I didn't move, didn't blink. He set the can down, picked up another, then finally looked at me. No smile, just that same middle-distance focus I'd seen in the liquor store footage. The burner buzzed once my hand. I answered without looking away from him. Stay put, Ames's voice said in my ear. 2 more minutes. Gil walked toward the counter, still watching me from the corner of his eye. He bought a pack of gum. Cash, as always. The owner handed him the change, and he pocketed it slowly, like time was something he could stretch. Then he turned, not toward the door, but toward my table. The burner buzzed again. If he talks to you, keep him talking, Ames said. We're rolling. He stopped at the edge of the table. Up close, the scar was even more obvious, running just under his cheekbone like a fingerprint in skin. You're in my seat, he said. The voice was calm, flat, like he was pointing out the weather. I didn't see your name on it, I said. He glanced at the empty chair across from me. Mind if I sit? I hesitated just long enough to make it look like a decision, then nodded. He lowered himself into the chair, folded his hands on the table. No coat removal, no shifting to get comfortable, just stillness. I've been watching you, he said. I noticed. I wanted to see if you'd keep chasing. And if I did... One corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. Then we'd have this conversation. I glanced toward the counter. The owner was gone, probably in the back with Ames. What do you want? I asked. He leaned in slightly. To make sure you understand that your brother's death wasn't personal. My jaw tightened. That's supposed to make it better? It's supposed to make it clear, he said. You were never the target, until you made yourself one. The burner buzzed again, twice this time. We have him on audio, Ames's voice said. But I need more. See if he'll admit the cannery. I set the phone down, speaker side toward him. And the cannery? I asked. That's your idea of a magic trick? He sat back. That was survival. Someone needed to be dead, and it wasn't going to be me. You staged it. I adapted it, he said. Body was already there. I just made it look like me. Whose body? His eyes narrowed. That's the wrong question. What's the right one? Why you're still breathing. Before I could answer, a noise from the back, a metallic scrape, made him glance toward the storage room door. Something in his posture changed. He stood, slow but ready. You brought friends, he said. And then he was moving toward the door. Before I could stop him, the burner roared in my ear, Don't follow, stay put. I didn't stay put. I shoved the chair back and went after him, the air in the market suddenly sharp with adrenaline. By the time I reached the storage room, the door to the alley was swinging shut. Ames was nowhere in sight. Neither was Gil, but on the floor, under the swinging door, lay the lighter from my motel room box. Still warm. 7. The alley smelled like oil and coal metal. My breath came out in sharp bursts, mixing with the exhaust of a vehicle that had just peeled out. Ames was standing halfway down the narrow strip, gun low at her side, eyes scanning both ends. Her hair was loose from its clip, one sleeve smeared with grime. He went over the fence, she said before I could ask. I looked past her. Chain link topped with barbed wire, but there was a dent in one panel where someone had stepped on the middle brace to climb. You didn't follow? I said, not blind, she replied. Not when I don't know who's waiting on the other side. She glanced at the lighter in my hand. He left that for you? Or for you, I said. Doesn't matter. Either way, it's a message. He's not afraid of proximity. We cut through the alley to the street. The traffic was light. Delivery vans, an old bus groaning at the corner, a couple of pedestrians with collars turned up against the wind. No SUV, no man in a cap. Ames holstered her weapon, then pulled out her phone and made a call I could only hear one side of. Unit on Masons? Suspect just fled westbound, possibly on foot. No visual. No, not safe for pursuit. We regroup. When she hung up, she started walking fast toward the SUV. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere he won't expect us to be, she said. And somewhere with walls. That somewhere turned out to be the storage unit again. Ames locked the roll-up door behind us and tossed me a bottle of water. I didn't realize how dry my mouth was until I drained half of it without stopping. She went straight to the corkboard and stuck the lighter onto it with a pushpin, just below the Polaroids. We treat this like evidence, she said, not a souvenir. Then she turned to me. I need you to tell me exactly what he said, word for word. I repeated the conversation at Mason's. Your brother's death wasn't personal. You made yourself a target. Someone needed to be dead, and it wasn't going to be me. Ames wrote it down, then underlined someone needed to be dead. That's leverage, she said. If we can connect that to a real missing person, we've got him for staging the cannery and obstruction at minimum. Minimum? Minimum, she said grimly. If we can tie him to your brother's case, it gets heavier. The burner buzzed. Not a call, just a text. From the same unknown number as before. A single line. You run like your brother. I felt my grip on the phone tighten. He's watching us now. Ames didn't look at the screen. He's telling you he was watching back then, too. She moved to the map, tapped a point about 3 blocks from Mason's. There's a traffic cam here. If he went over that fence and cut through the yard, he might have passed under it. You think he's sloppy enough to let himself get caught on camera? I think he's arrogant enough to believe we can't use it even if we do, she said. We drove there in silence, parked just out of view of the cam, and waited while Ames called in a favor. 10 minutes later, a tech from the department showed up with a laptop and a backpack, pulled the feed, and started scrubbing through the last hour. At 2:32, there he was, hood up, hands in pockets, walking like he had nowhere to be. He glanced up at the camera for half a beat, just long enough to make sure we'd see his face. Then he smiled. Izzy, I started. Yes, Ames said. He's taunting us. We were back in the SUV when her phone rang again, blocked number. She put on speaker. Detective. Gil's voice said lazy as a Sunday. Your friend is quick on his feet, almost like he's been training for this. What do you want, Gil? Ames asked. I want you both to understand, he said. Every step you take toward me is one I've already taken toward you. Threats won't help you, Ames said evenly. Not threats, he replied. Just a reminder. I've been in your homes. I felt my stomach drop. Mine. Yes, Gil said. And hers. Nice coffee maker, detective. You should replace the filter. The line went dead. Ames stared at the windshield for a long second. He's escalating. That means he's about to make a move. On who? She looked at me. Whoever will hurt the most. The burner buzzed again as we pulled back into traffic. Another text, a blurry photo taken from the end of a hallway. I knew the door at the far end instantly, my mother's apartment. The caption read, "Tomorrow." I turned to Ames. "We can't wait for him to make a mistake." She didn't disagree. The photo of my mother's apartment door burned on the screen of the burner. The number plate in the image, 3B, was clear enough to count the scratches. I hadn't been there in a week. Ames didn't waste time with false reassurance. "We're not letting him walk into that building," she said. "We turn it into the meeting place instead." "You want to use my mother as bait?" I asked, louder than I meant to. "I want to use what he thinks is her apartment," she corrected. "We move her somewhere safe tonight. Then we stage the place, so it looks like she's still there. She'll know enough. You'll call her, normal voice, no details over the phone. I'll send someone I trust to get her and take her to a secure location." At 8:10 p.m., I was sitting in my mother's living room. The place smelled faintly of lavender cleaner, her way of fighting the old radiator dust. She didn't ask questions when I told her she needed to pack a bag. Just gave me the same look she used to give when I was a kid and came home with a split lip. "I'll deal with this later. But for now, I believe you." By 9 o'clock, she was in the back seat of a plain sedan when Officer Ames, introduced only as Lou, they drove off toward the north side of the city. Then we began the stage. Ames had brought a kit that looked like it belonged to a movie set. Tiny hidden cameras, motion sensors, a directional mic the size of a lipstick tube. We planted them in the hall outside, inside the door frame, and in the kitchen facing the entryway. She left the lights on in the living room. TV set to a low-volume cooking show. "From the hall, it'll sound like she's watching it," she said. On the coffee table, she placed a mug with fresh tea and half a crossword puzzle. I noticed she'd filled in only the top row, enough to look started but unfinished. Details, she told me, sold the illusion. Midnight came and went. No knock, no shadow under the door. At 2:14 a.m., the motion sensor blinked on her laptop. We both leaned in. The hallway camera showed a figure coming toward the apartment. Hood up, head angled slightly down. "Gil." He stopped 3 feet from the door, looking straight at it. Then he stepped sideways, out of frame. "What's he doing?" I whispered. Ames shook her head, eyes on the feed. "Waiting." 2 minutes later, the sound mic picked up a faint click. The handle turned slowly. The latch caught. It was locked, but he didn't jiggle like a burglar in a hurry. He just let it go and crouched. He was in frame again now, holding something up to the peephole. The kitchen camera caught it better than the hall one. A Polaroid pressed flat against the glass. Even blurred through the lens, I recognized it. My mother, in this very apartment, sitting on the couch. It was recent. She was wearing the sweater I'd seen her in tonight. My throat went dry. "When did he?" Ames cut me off. "Quiet." The streets blurred under the SUV's headlights. Riverside flashing on the GPS like it was daring us to get there in time. Ames drove like she'd already accepted the ticket. One hand on the wheel, the other flipping through her mental Rolodex of worst-case scenarios. "What's 10 to 54? I asked, though I already suspected. "Possible deceased," she said without looking at me. Could be a false alarm. Could be anything. Could be him. Riverside was a narrow, 3-story complex pressed between a laundromat and a boarded-up pharmacy. The building's brick facade was lit in harsh white by the flashing strobes of 2 patrol cars. The wind off the river cut through my coat as soon as I stepped out. Lou's sedan was parked half on the curb. The driver's door was open. Lou himself was standing near the entry, jaw tight, hands flexing in and out of fists. "She's fine," he said as soon as we reached him. We never even made it inside. "What happened?" Ames asked. Lou jerked a thumb at the stairwell. "I was getting her up the steps when I saw it. Figured we should stop right there and call you." We followed him to the second-floor landing. The apartment door, number 2C, was ajar. Inside, the lights were on. It was staged like a crime scene, without the crime. A coffee mug tipped over on the counter, tea staining a manila folder labeled with my name. A chair overturned in the middle of the living room. On the floor, In deliberate view, another Polaroid. This one wasn't my mother. It was me, sitting in the Mason's Market window the day before. The angle was from outside, maybe across the street, and behind the reflection of my own face in the glass was Gil's reflection, faint but unmistakable. I stepped closer. Ames's hand shot out to stop me. "Don't touch anything," she said. She crouched to look at the photo without picking it up. "He's telling us he was closer than we knew. Again." Lou's voice was low. I swept the place. No sign of forced entry. No one inside. Whoever left us came in with a key. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. "You think he had keys for both my mother's building and here?" "I think he has keys for wherever he wants," Ames said. Back in the hall, one of the uniforms approached Ames. "Detective, we pulled security from the laundromat across the street. You're going to want to see this." On the grainy black and white feed, at 1:47 a.m., a hooded figure crossed the street toward 2CS entrance. He moved like he had all the time in the world. No attempt to hide from the camera. He looked up at it once, head tilted just enough for the scar to catch the light. In his right hand was a lighter, the charcoal gray one. He spun it between his fingers before putting it back in his pocket. Ames exhaled through her nose, slow. "This isn't about killing anyone tonight. This is about laying the board for tomorrow." "What's tomorrow?" I asked. She looked at me like she was considering whether to say it out loud. "The anniversary of your brother's death." It hit me like the cold air rushing in from the stairwell. "You think he's going to try to recreate it?" "I think," she said, "he wants you to be there for it." We left Lou posted at Riverside with strict orders. No one in or out, and my mother doesn't come within 2 blocks. Back in the SUV, Ames was already on the phone to the tech team, ordering extra eyes on every location Gil had touched in the last week. Then she called in a favor I could only half follow, something about a control perimeter and undercover units. When she hung up, she looked at me. "If tomorrow's the play, we have one shot to end this." "How?" "By letting him think he's in control. We set the scene, somewhere public enough for him to feel bold, controlled enough for us to shut it down." "And I'm the draw," I said. "You're the only thing he's been chasing," she said, "and the only thing he won't walk away from." The burner buzzed. New text, no number, a location pin, and 4 words, same place, same time. I tapped the pin. It was the liquor store, the one from the night my brother died. The liquor store looked exactly as it had in the security footage from a year ago. Same flicker in the neon beer sign. Same cracked tile at the threshold. The only thing different was me standing there in daylight, wondering how it had all ended up here. Ames had spent the early morning turning the block into a silent fortress. Unmarked cars idled on both ends of the street. Plainclothes officers milled in the neighboring businesses, pretending to shop. A tech team had hidden 3 cameras inside the store. One over counter, one near the back cooler, and one tucked into the gum rack by the register. "This is where you stand," Ames said, marking the spot near the refrigerated cases. "It puts you in his line of sight as soon as he walks in. Don't approach him. Don't leave unless I say. And if he tries to walk me out, you resist just enough to keep him talking." She handed me a small clip-on mic. "We need him saying something that ties him to your brother's death, or the cannery staging, preferably both." At 1:58 p.m., I was in position. The hum of the coolers was the only sound in the store. Outside, traffic drifted past like it didn't know the street was armed to the teeth. 2:06. My pulse was steady, but my grip on the bottled water in my hand was white-knuckle tight. 2:11. A black SUV rolled past the front windows. Didn't stop. 2:15. The door opened. Gil stepped in like he owned the floor tiles. Head bare this time. Scar in full view. His coat was unbuttoned, hands empty. He glanced around, saw me, and that faint not-quite smile appeared. "You came," he said. "You asked," I replied. He walked toward me, slow, each step clicking in my ears louder than the cooler hum. "You know why we're here?" he asked. "You tell me." He stopped 2 feet away. "Because anniversaries matter. Because I hate loose ends." The mic was hot. Every word was going into a recorder somewhere behind the counter. I just needed to keep him going. Lou sends at the cannery? I asked. That was cleanup, he said without hesitation. Your brother, that was work. What kind of work? He tilted his head. The kind you don't get paid for unless no one talks after. Who paid you? He smiled then, slow and deliberate. You think I'm stupid enough to say that in here? From outside came the faintest chirp in my earpiece. Ames's signal. Units were moving. Gil's eyes flicked toward the front door. Something in his posture shifted. Fight or flight, deciding which it wanted to be. You brought friends, he said. You brought threats, I countered. His gaze sharpened, and for a moment I thought he'd bolt. Instead, he stepped closer, so close I could smell the faint trace of cigarette smoke and cold air on his coat. You want closure? He said quietly. I can give you names, but you'll have to walk out that door with me. Before I could answer, the door behind him banged open. 2 plainclothes officers moving fast, badges out, voices firm. Hands where we can see them. Gil didn't move at first. Then, with exaggerated slowness, he raised his hands. You should have stayed out of it, he said to me. Ames stepped in behind the officers. You should have stayed dead, she said. They cuffed him against the front counter. He didn't fight, didn't even glance at them, just kept his eyes locked on me. You think this ends with me in a cell? He asked. I think it ends with you not in my life, I said. Outside, as they walked him to the unmarked car, a small crowd gathered. Gil glanced over his shoulder one last time. The faintest trace of that not smile still there. Ames came to stand beside me. We got the cannery admission, she said. It's enough to reopen everything, your brother's case included. I nodded, but it didn't feel like victory, more like the air finally moving again after a long, stale year. That night, I sat in my mother's apartment. She was back, safe, watching a cooking show with the sound just low enough that we could still talk. It's over, she asked. For him? Not yet, I said. But for us? Yeah, it's over. The burner phone sat on the coffee table. Screen dark. No more Polaroids. No more pins on maps. Just quiet. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind it.